We are continuing the reading of Allama Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam, and we are looking at his claim about Ghazali's his claims about Ghazali's regarding philosophical skepticism that we looked at in the last session, and we are going to continue to look at his comparison between Imam Ghazali and Kant. That's the explicit comparison he's making here. But with reference to philosophical skepticism, as we saw, it's also, at least implicitly, connecting Ghazali's work to Descartes' work. So we are going to look at that today. So Ghazali's philosophical skepticism, which, however, went a little too far. A little too far in what? This is very vague, I guess. Virtually did the same kind of work in the world of Islam in breaking the back of that proud but shallow rationalism which moved in the same direction as pre-Kantian rationalism in Germany. We have already done some sessions on German rationalism and the relationship of Kant's work to rationalism and all that, but we are going to draw on that discussion to assess these specific claims today. But start with philosophical skepticism. As we saw last time, Ghazali is not a philosophical skeptic in the Cartesian sense, which is the general which is the general sense in which philosophical skepticism is used in modern philosophy. But even if we concede that Ghazali is some sort of philosophical skeptic, he's certainly not a methodological skeptic in the sense. So it's pertinent to make some comparison between Ghazali's work and Descartes' work at this point, and also comparison between and the relationship between Descartes' work and Kant's work, because as we saw before, we see Kant as the follower of Descartes despite all his criticism, and we also see Ghazali's work as totally different from Descartes' work, and also by the same virtue different from Kant's work. So we want to make these points clear today. So, philosophical skepticism. As we saw last time, Descartes is the founder of modern philosophical skepticism, and he's certainly the founder of what we call methodological skepticism. Thus, he uses skepticism as a method. Skepticism as a method to do at least two things. To refute skepticism. And second, to build the structure of knowledge from the scratch. That's the second thing. And third thing was to build this structure of knowledge on absolute certainty. And by absolute certainty, you mean what cannot be doubted. And in that sense, the number 3 is related to number 1. Because without refuting skepticism, he cannot do anything about the third point. So basically, Descartes' project was to build a new structure of knowledge, a new conception of knowledge, new system of knowledge as a whole, on totally new grounds. So to do that, he had to destroy the structures which were present before. So the destruction of those structures was the outcome of his methodological skepticism. And this new system of knowledge was to build on absolute certainty. And methodological skepticism was the foundation. So skepticism, methodological skepticism or Cartesian skepticism was the foundation of absolute certainty. And through metaphysical, methodological skepticism, what he comes across is the absolute true, certain criterion of truth outside knowledge itself. And that criterion is the criterion of pure subjectivity. And this subjectivity is a strange type of subjectivity. Ancient or medieval civilization didn't know anything about it. And I think it was invented by Luther and Descartes, basically. This pure subjectivity is pure interiority. Because what he calls subjectivity, what is, I think, is prior to body. Because according to the Cartesian thing, your body is external to you. So your body is not really an essential part of you. And in principle, that I think, or that subjectivity can exist without body. And although his methodological skepticism is able to cast doubt on his own body, it's not able to cast doubt on his own subjectivity. So what he built is new system of knowledge was on pure subjectivity. And from this you have two traditions which emerge from this, despite their criticism of Descartes. One is empiricist Cartesianism and the other is empiricist rationalism. And the great thinkers in this tradition were Locke and Hume, and great thinker in this tradition was Leibniz. And Kant was basically a disciple of Leibniz. But through his reading of Hume, he was shaken in his Leibnizian Cartesian rationalism, and what he tried to do is to synthesize two Cartesian traditions. That is empiricism and rationalism. And this synthesis, Kantian synthesis, is critique as well as a new development of the essentially Cartesian project, which is the modernist project. So that's that's what Descartes did, and that's the relationship between Descartes and Kant. So let us now go back to Iqbal's claim about and Iqbal's comparison with between Imam Ghazali and now Ghazali's philosophers, which however little too far, virtually did the same kind of work in the world of Islam, breaking the back of the proud, but shallow rationalism which moved in the same direction as pre-Kantian rationalism in Germany. Now there are three claims here which are wrong if we accept my reading of Kant and Descartes and pre-Kantian German rationalism. And those claims are that those three claims are there are three claims to which we reject here in Iqbal, and it's a misreading. First is Ghazali's work is totally different from that of Descartes, despite similarities which are there because of the similarity between the sources on which both Ghazali and Descartes draw on. That those are the sources of ancient skepticism. But while Descartes transformed the ancient skepticism and established a new tradition of philosophical skepticism, Ghazali didn't do anything like that. That wasn't part of his project. And there are three crucial differences between Ghazali and Descartes. The first is Ghazali's skepticism is whatever it is not methodological. What does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean to say that Ghazali's skepticism is not methodological? At least few things. Ghazali wasn't looking to refute skepticism as such, like refute in Cartesian sense, that final refutation. In fact, even if Ghazali was, and in books on Ilm al-Kalam you will see some sort of refutation of skepticism. Their skepticism they're trying to refute is ancient skepticism, not the Cartesian skepticism, because what Descartes refutes is his own transformation of skepticism, not the ancient skepticism. Although he tries to give the impression that he's refuting skepticism as such. So Ghazali is not interested in refuting skepticism forever, nor he transforms the skepticism into a new type of skepticism. And secondly, Ghazali is not trying to destroy the system of knowledge he inherits. That's one of the main differences. Because what Descartes is trying to do through his skepticism is negatively trying to destroy the scholastic structures and systems of knowledge. Ghazali, despite all his critique, he is not trying to destroy that system. He is just trying to purify it, trying to critique it, trying to, and through that, he is trying to revive the Islamic sciences. He is not trying to refute those sciences or their methodological basis. That's the huge difference that Descartes and Ghazali's negative part of their work for Descartes is destruction of Christian scholastic system of knowledge. Ghazali's work is anyway the critique and purification, and not the total rejection of the system of Islamic science. That's one. Second important difference between Ghazali and Descartes' work is on methodological and that's a positive. Descartes used positively doubt or hyperbolical doubt or skepticism as positively as a method to arrive at, firstly to refute skepticism, but also after destroying the system to arrive at absolute certainty. Here, his difference between Ghazali and Descartes are two. First, Ghazali doesn't use skepticism as a method at all. None of his books show any sign of that. Second thing is, Ghazali doesn't share with Descartes' ambition to start with absolute certainty. Because Ghazali's Descartes' conception of absolute certainty is what cannot be possibly doubted, even psychologically speaking. Ghazali and Islamic tradition as a whole has no such ambition. Certainty, even absolute certainty, whatever can be granted in this world to non-prophets is a certainty within the range of zan. So in Islam, certainty, Islamic system of knowledge, certainty and probable knowledge are on one spectrum. There's no clear demarcation or a gulf between probability and certainty. And even in the sense of prophets, if we look at what Quran says about Ibrahim Khalilullah alayhi salam, liyatmanna qalbi, that itmanan of qalb also is not absolute certainty in the Cartesian sense, because that is always increasing also. So and that's also Atai Rabbani in a sense, and not the outcome of that. So Ghazali his work is totally different from Descartes' work in the sense that Ghazali doesn't use skepticism as a method, positively speaking. Ghazali has no ambition of rebuilding. Firstly, he has no ambition of destroying the structure, and if he is not destroying, then there is no question of rebuilding, but he doesn't have any conception of notion of absolute certainty as a conception which is beyond probability, and that sort of certainty is not really a human trait. That is more the outcome of humanism, which Descartes espouses. And finally, so there's an absolute certainty. Finally, even if there is absolute certainty, that absolute certainty is not subjectivity, because Ghazali has no notion of a subjectivity as pure interiority, which is devoid of our body and all those things. Despoiled is term Sufi denigration of our body and our desire. There is no notion of subjectivity as pure interiority or pure thought. pure, I think, in Ghazali, and in that sense. On the other hand, Ghazali's notion of subject is that of body and soul and its relationship with God. So, to wrap up, the difference between Ghazali and Descartes, its understanding is important because Kant is a disciple of Descartes. So, there's no methodological skepticism, there's no absolute certain the same, there's no notion of subjectivity, there's no notion of destroying the existing structures of knowledge, and there's no notion of rebuilding them on the notion of absolute certainty. Ghazali has none of those. And Kant, even though he critiques some of that, he still works within the same subjectivist Cartesian tradition, as we saw, and we'll see in the next session as well. So in the next session we will build on this to assess Iqbal's claims about the similarities between Kant's work and differences between Kant's and Ghazali's work, inshallah.